America's National Security Agency was forced to suspend its direct mass tapping of public phone calls this week after lawmakers decided not to extend key provisions of the so-called Patriot Act. The media was quick to hail it then as a victory for privacy.
Your phone records are private for the first time in years.
3 key provisions of the Patriot Act
Have expired.
The National Security Agency can no longer collect Americans' phone records in bulk.
Those powers went away at the stroke of midnight when Senate infighting allowed the Patriot Act to expire.
But the caveat here, in reality, Congress simply replaced one surveillance law with another. The so-called new Freedom Act still allows the NSA to tap into private data, although the process is now less direct. Under the earlier Patriot Act, public communications could be monitored by the government agency without a warrant. The information could also be stored by the NSA for up to 5 years. Under the new law, telephone companies now are responsible for keeping that data for the agency, which needs a court warrant to access it. Political cartoonist and author Ted Roll says privacy protection hasn't actually improved.
It's a symbolic step in the right direction, but it isn't meaningful in a practical sense at all. The vast majority of NSA programs were not even under discussion in the debate over the Freedom Act. The NSA will be able to get it just as easily as before. The NSA will be able to ask the FISA court for approval. And historically, the FISA court always approves every single request to spy on people. So most people will look at the headline, they'll say USA Freedom Act passes, NSA reined in. So I'm afraid that people will move on to the next issue and stop thinking that, that their privacy is at risk from the NSA, although that's not the case.
Former NSA Director Michael Hayden confirmed the new surveillance law is indeed a continuation of the previous one. And in the latest edition of Going Underground from RT, you can watch it online now, by the way, RT.com. American whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg shared his take on the case.
The surveillance that Snowden revealed actually is a violation of human rights all over the world. Mass surveillance. By the way, all of them, including legitimate support the idea of targeted, warranted surveillance of people for whom there's reasonable grounds for suspecting that they're criminals or terrorists of some sort. But the mass bulk surveillance of people who are not suspected, for whom there are no grounds for suspicion and whatnot, is a violation of basic human rights all over the world. And I think that Snowden, Manning, and I are Americans who are concerned when our government is violating other people's rights.
Video emerged last week showing a play at a Palestinian kindergarten in East Jerusalem which drew wide criticism for trying to bring scenes from daily life to the stage. Well, in one scene, we're seeing here, a child playing an Israeli soldier addresses a Palestinian boy, has a brief chat, and then pretends to shoot him. Other young actors shout patriotic slogans and grieve for the victim. The Israeli Education Ministry said it views the play, quote, very seriously and will investigate. Online reaction was widespread. Some users were quick to slam the play as anti-Semitic. Others, though, pointed out that children only learn from what they see every day and that for some, that's mistreatment by Israeli soldiers. Take a few of these following examples, too. In March, there was indignation after masked Israeli troops were filmed storming homes in the West Bank at night.
طب ما علي حرام يعني فيا مصغار
ابشر قديما شو اسمك انت
محمد.
Children were woken up, questioned and photographed as soldiers looked for youngsters suspected of throwing stones at the military. Here we see a dog used in the arrest of a teenager. Last summer's war in Gaza left over 500 children dead. Most of them were under 12 years old. Palestinian politician Mustafa Bagati says local children can't help but be deeply affected by the atmosphere of fear and violence that they're growing up in every day.
We are talking here about an atmosphere, a situation of violence that does affect children. Some of these children develop long-term effects on their psychology. The problem here is the continuation of an occupation that has become the longest in modern history, and a system of oppression and racial discrimination against the Palestinian people, and children feel that.
Washington's refusing to reconsider its plans to set up a new military base on the Japanese island of Okinawa. It's despite a plea from the island's governor, who's been in the US capital this week, to express his opposition to the move.
The people of Okinawa never offered their land to the US military for this base. The construction may damage the security arrangement between the US and Japan. My goal is to stop the construction of the Hinoka base.
Residents in Okinawa and activists in the capital, Tokyo, have protested against the base project. They don't want it simply relocated. They want it off the island completely, along with 30 other installations there. There's been a US presence on Okinawa since the end of the Second World War, but the protests look unlikely to bring about any changes. That's because the US State Department insists the move is in line with its commitment to the defense of Japan. Earlier we spoke to Tim Beale, an Asia expert who believes Tokyo's just as unlikely to cede to the demands of Okinawa residents.
From the point of view of Japan, Okinawa is basically an internal colony, as the mayor of Naga was pointing out. It's a colonial situation. It's not, in a sense, not really Japan. It's a separate area, separate people, a separate history. To a large extent, actually, but Tokyo can ignore the demands of the people in Okinawa. They're a long way away.
Japan's far from the only country hosting US bases in the Pacific. Tim Beale questions their true purpose.
It says it's there to defend Japan, but that, of course, is not the real story. It's really not plausible to suggest that any country wants to attack Japan. The United States primarily is worried about the rise of China, and the military aspect of that means that it needs its bases in Japan and South Korea, but mainly Japan.
Scuffles have broken out between police and a crowd of noisy students in the US state of Texas. The officers, some of them mounted, tried to disperse the partygoers using pepper spray. This incident happened on a street that's popular, apparently, with university students. Witnesses say, though, there'd been no violence or disturbance that warranted the use of force by the authorities. Saudi-led airstrikes have hit the Armed Forces HQ in the Yemeni capital Sana'a that's been occupied by Houthi rebels. At least 44 people have reportedly been killed in this latest raid against militant targets. Almost 2,000 people have fallen victim, and more than 500,000 have been displaced since the campaign in Yemen began in late March. Barcelona football fans have been partying through the night in Berlin in the wake of their team's Champions League victory. The Catalans defeated Juventus 3-1 in the final. It's the club's 5th European title and completes then a clean sweep of trophies. Barcelona had also won this season's Spanish League and the Copa del Rey. Now, technology, let's talk about that. Our increasingly automated society might make our lives easier, but are the robots taking over? Well, of course, the reality is far less frightening in the real world, with scientists that are developing ever more lifelike machines, which we're about to tell you about. Take a look at this robot, which can mimic how a cheetah jumps. The reason for all that? Well, scientists have designed the first four-legged robot that can leap over those hurdles and navigate itself. The developers hope it could one day be used in disaster response. But as robots get more sophisticated, there's a downside to it. Research suggests they'll increasingly put humans out of work. One study has shown that in 20 years' time, people will be replaced in dozens of different jobs. For instance, it says there's a 99% chance that telemarketers will be automated by 2025. The same fate might await sports referees in an attempt to get rid of all those dodgy decisions. And how about robot models taking to the fashion industry's catwalks? Maybe not. Even bookkeepers, though, could find themselves replaced by automated alternative. 'Tis the price of change and development, they say. Thanks for being with us. Coming up to 25 minutes past 5 in the afternoon, I'm Kevin Owen. We always appreciate your company here at RT International. After the break, Worlds Apart today, looking at the sanctions slapped on Russia by the West over the conflict in Ukraine.